Well, hello, avid readers of Christian fiction. I'm Tricia Goyer, and I'm so glad to be here with Misty Beller. And we are going to be talking about her book. Now, I have it on Audible, so I will show you. I'll put it up here. It's A Warrior's Heart, and I'm listening to it, and it is so good. But first of all, Misty, just welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I've loved the Avid Readers group for years now, and it's so excited to actually get to interact with you guys.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you for being here. And like I said, we're talking about A Warrior's Heart. But before we talk about the book, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So that's a long conversation.
Go as much as you want.
I am a full-time writer, wife and mom to 4 kiddos right now, and 1 more on the way. So I've got the puffy face, 7 months pregnant.
Wow.
We have 3 girls and 1 boy now, and a girl on the way. So my poor husband and our youngest son, or our only son, Matthew, are going to be outnumbered still. So.
That's okay.
But I do write full time. My favorite stories to write are mountain stories. They're usually set in the Rocky Mountains. Usually involve kind of strong heroines and mountain men or some form of that. A Warrior's Heart definitely falls into that category. So the female heroine is she's a warrior. She's kind of the protector of her village, and the hero is a mountain man spy for the American Army. So yeah, that's the kind of stories I write, and I love getting to do what I love to do every day.
Awesome. And I have been enjoying it so much. This is the first book I've read, which I'm actually listening to. So the first book I've read / listened to of yours. And it's so fun. And this one is set, like you said, it's set in the mountains, which is the Canadian Rockies. And I lived in Montana for 15 years. So right by Glacier National Park.
Oh, that's my favorite place in the world.
I know. It is amazing. And that's what I was going to ask you, because you talk about you love like mountain men and the mountains. So how did you pick, like, out of everything, this is what I want to focus and I want to write on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've always loved the mountains. We live in South Carolina, which is very far away from Montana and the Rocky Mountains. But we have family in California. So growing up, we would drive across the country about every other year. And we would take a different route each time. So sometimes we'd take the I-40 across the middle of the U.S., and sometimes we'd go the southern route through Texas and the real western areas. Sometimes we'd go up I-70 and even I-90 sometimes through the northern routes through the mountains. So I really got to see the country growing up. And then when I didn't start writing until I was an adult with 2 kids. And I knew I wanted to write, I knew I wanted to write one novel. It was on my bucket list.
Yeah.
And as I started writing that one, I knew I wanted it to be Christian historical romance because that's what I love to read. And I was thinking cowboys at the time, Texas. And so my first book, actually the trilogy, is set in Texas. But as I was writing that first book, I got the seed of an idea for a story set in the Rocky Mountains, in a very remote setting, kind of log cabin setting. And it's a mail-order bride gone wrong kind of thing. When she gets there, her groom-to-be is died, and she gets snowed in and injured and all those things that I love to write about. But as I was writing that book, I realized this is what I love. I love this kind of setting. And these really strong people. And so I just, from then on, began writing stories set in the mountains with mountain men and strong heroines. And it's fun. It's fun. It challenges me to make sure that even though the setting is still somewhat the same, my settings are usually in Montana territory or up in the Canadian Rockies. Sometimes as far down as Wyoming, but it's, even though the setting is almost the same, having totally different story that's a bit of a challenge sometimes, but it's a fun challenge. And I have some brainstorming and beta readers who help keep me on track with that. This is something you did with a book 5 books back, so you Good. I love having good people around me. So.
Yeah, it's so funny when, like, at a conference or something, someone would say, "I love," and they'll talking about a character, and I'm like, "Okay, which book was that in?" Because when you get to write a lot, it's like, okay, I love these people, but then you kind of move on, and then your mind is filled with other people and other situations, and so it's good to have those readers that keep us on our toes.
Yes, exactly. And I find myself, even with names, with character names, like you said, accidentally boxing myself into a corner with, the heroine's name in this other book was this, but I somehow worked in a child of the heroine is the same name. So, oops.
I know we kind of have our favorites that I have to watch out for.
Yes.
Oh, so tell us a little bit about this book. And I just love it because there's this hidden away group of people, and it's just so unique. So and I'm sure you can tell it better than I can explain to it. So just give us like the elevator pitch of what A Warrior's Heart is about.
Yeah, so like you said, it's set in the Canadian Rockies, but it's set in this hidden secret village. They have been living in caves for over 100 years. It's actually a French settlement who moved west to get away from all the politics of that was happening in French Canada at that point. So they've been hidden, totally cut off from the rest of the world, except a couple of native villages that they trade with for 100 years. And they had one really bad experience with some Englishmen who came in and just did a massacre of their women and children. So they are determined, anyone from the outside is bad. And like I said, the heroine is actually, she's worked her way up to be the chief provider and defender of the group. So she's in charge of the guards and the hunters and all those folks. Well, the hero is a spy for the U.S. Army. Like I said, he kind of fits the mountain man role as well. So he has been sent north into, at the time it was called Rupert's Land. We call it Alberta now, but wasn't really part of Canada. And this is during the War of 1812, actually 1815. So the U.S. is fighting Britain, and Canada is owned by Britain. But this is west of the Canada that was known at the time. So he's been sent to this area to find this special mineral that scientists have suspect will help create this big bomb, basically an atomic bomb. And so he's looking for this mineral based off some journals of a trapper who had gone in the area years before. And he doesn't realize that he stumbled upon the secret village until he nearly walks through their gates, and Brielle, the heroine, shoots him with an arrow that puts him to sleep.
And this is like right at the beginning. You open up the chapter, and I'm like, wait, he's already shot.
Yeah. My books do tend to be somewhat adventurous, so there's
you're just jumping in. You're just jumping in there. Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, so Evan is kept prisoner there as they try to determine, is he really a bad guy or is he a good guy that we can let loose, but we really can't let the outsiders know about us. So, and as Brielle falls for him, she begins to think maybe they shouldn't kill this guy. So, So it was really a really neat book to write. Most of my books have a journey component to them, and this book doesn't have that as much. So that particular part was something of a challenge for me in rewrites. But I really, really just fell in love with Brielle and Evan. And right now I'm writing book 3 in this series, and I love this series, and I hope readers do too, as much as I do. I'm not ready for it to end by any stretch.
Yeah, it's so unique because you said like they've been hidden away for 100 years. They speak 3 languages, which I'm like, okay, that is goals right there. But I mean, so it's just like, it's not Native American like you expect. It's not like, it's so different than anything that you would expect. And even though he's a spy, he is honest and he is God-fearing. And so it's like, well, that's unique. And so it's interesting to see these dynamics. Like, she's a protector and a warrior, and he's a spy, but he's also very manly, but he's also honest. So even when she's questioning him, he's trying to figure out, like, how can I be truthful? It's such a neat mix of characters that you don't see all the time, which is wonderful because, I mean, when you read a lot of books, you think, okay, this is like this character, this is like this. And so it's unique and different. So I'd love to hear, like, historically, you mentioned the War of 1812, and you mentioned, like Canadian Rockies, and this part wasn't even part of Canada. So how much is like historically true, and how much did you just like, we're just going to do this thing?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I did not do an author letter in the back of this book. I really wish I had, because there's so many things in my mind now I really wish I could have told readers.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, there was not actually a village hidden in caves in the Alberta area. That's the question that the early readers have had.
Yeah.
I really wish there was. It would be so cool.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where the seed of the idea came from. I was listening to a podcast about history, and they were talking about when the Vikings first came to like Nova Scotia and the Newfoundland and all the Canada stuff there. And they were talking about, first of all, the female warriors. And so that got me thinking, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But then they were saying that there were, they've since discovered that there were probably a number of settlements that survived a lot longer than we thought that they did.
Mm-hmm.
They moved west and were a little more protected, didn't just die out almost immediately. So then I got that's what spurred the idea. I thought, they moved west. What about if they moved a long way west?
Yeah.
And just began to thrive in this this area in the mountains. And so maybe no one knew about them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how the idea started. We ended up changing them from being a Viking community that was hidden away for 1,000 years to being a French community that was just hidden for 100 years.
Yeah.
Not quite as fantastical. So as far as I know, the village of Laurent is not a real place, but it is, the seed of the idea came from a real setting. I do try very hard to keep the historical accuracy of what was going on with the War of 1812 at the time. And a lot of people might not know that the War of 1812 actually lasted 3 years. It wasn't just 1812.
Yeah.
So this is at the very tail end of the war. And so America, well, in the book, Evan's been assigned to go north and look for this pitchblende mineral. That's a little bit of drawn on imagination as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was, so basically it's, the official name of the mineral is escaping me, but anyway, there was a mineral that they knew about at the time that later on they learned, when combined with this other mineral, could make a pretty big explosion.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that they knew that it could make the explosion during the War of 1812, but I can imagine that in a wartime setting that scientists knew things that they weren't really ready to announce to the rest of the world. So,
right.
So again, but those elements are kind of the outside setting to what's actually happening in Laurent. So.
Yeah. And I love that. I love how we get those seeds of ideas, and then our mind goes, ooh, like, okay, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And we can mix these together. I was reading a missionary book with the kids on Winfried Grenfield, who was on the Labrador coast of Canada. And he was like hiking out in the middle of nowhere and came upon Moravian missionaries that had been there a while.
Wow.
And they were from Count Zinzendorf had a Moravian mission headquarters in Germany, and they would send people all over the world. And I'm like, those missionaries had been there. It was I mean, decades. It wasn't like 2 years, and they were just back there with they weren't the Eskimos, with whatever it's called on the Canadian side type of people, and they were missionaries up there. And I'm thinking, so it is like, all of a sudden there are people that settle and that move different places for different reasons, and so I love how history is just kind of like unraveling, like, oh, there was a whole different community that was here. So I love that seed of idea, like you just went with it.
Yeah, there are so many layers, and the deeper you dig, the more fascinating things get. So yeah, so there probably was not an exact Laurent, but there were probably a number of villages kind of similar but different. So
yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you mentioned this is the first is it a 3-book series that you're going to be doing?
Right now it's planned to be a 3-book series.
Okay.
So as readers go through this first book, pay attention to some of the, they're not really minor characters. They are on the page quite a bit in this book, but
So Audrey.
yes, Audrey gets booked too.
All
I
right.
loved Audrey. And
Yeah.
I can't share the cover art for it yet, but I just saw it this week, the cover art for Audrey's story, and I'm so excited. Bethany House has just been amazing to work with this
Yeah.
series.
I mean,
So.
yeah, the cover is just amazing. I was gonna show it again. I'm trying to see if I can make it, but I can't make it bigger on my phone, but I can put it up here. I mean, yeah, it's
Yes,
just, this is the audible version, but yeah, it's such
they covered.
beautiful.
They included the cave, and you really get that warrior feel with Brielle. So
Yeah, the mountains, and then you're like, wait a minute, what's she wearing? And she has a bow in her hand, and so yeah, it's definitely like, okay, I want to know what is happening
yes,
in this book.
yes, yeah. Brielle is such a, for me anyway, she was such a fascinating personality to write, because she is this strong warrior facade, and even back then, or we say today, it's women have to struggle to kind of reach the same place as men do. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it was even more so back then, but she had to really fight and earn her role as the chief of the guards and the hunters and whatnot, but yet she has this vulnerable, not quite sure of herself side that she only shows to those few people in her inner circle. So there were definitely some things about her personality that I could really relate to.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what facade we show the rest of the world, it's there's always some insecurity on the inside.
I think that's
So
with everybody. Absolutely, I think so many people will be able to relate to her character.
yeah, I know I can. I drew on a lot of personal experience there.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
you talk about this like not a journey, but the journey in this book is like internal, I think, with both characters. It's
Yeah.
like the things that they want, maybe they shouldn't want, or yeah, just their interaction with each other. It kind of pulls those things out, and they don't even know if the other person is trustworthy, if they should be sharing. So it is, I mean,
Yes.
the journey is definitely internal.
Yes. Exactly. And with Evan, there was another part too that that I did not plan for in the book, but that just really that I grew as I wrote his character. It was just one of those things that happened on the page. But his spiritual growth, he's a
Mm-hmm.
spy, and they're trained to lie. They're trained to just come up with whatever off the top of their head that's not true, and then convince the person that that's the truth. And so he's really kind of burnt out on that. He's going into the story, he's realizing that that's really not the way he wants to live his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so his journey through much of the story is spiritual, and there's of course lots of other facets too, but he's also kind of a protector and a doer. And so as Brielle puts herself in these situations, she's the warrior, so she has to kind of take charge and do some of the dangerous things. And as he really falls for her, he again is locked in this cell through most of the story. So he can't be out there helping her and protecting her. So he realizes that God is assigning him the job of praying and covering her,
Mm-hmm.
on his knees through the night in prayer. And I definitely had not planned for that to be part of the story either. But that was really a growth thing for me too. With kids and with general life, we can't
Yeah.
always be the one out there fighting or, safeguarding our kids or whatnot. Sometimes we're the one behind the scenes just covering them with prayer.
I love that so much. In fact, that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, is that the spiritual elements of this book are definitely like strong faith elements. And then there's some Christian fiction that's just clean. I mean, which is wonderful, just clean reads.
Yeah.
They might pray, or they might say, talk about God very briefly, but it's just a clean read. But the spiritual arc is in your book. I mean, it was very clear. I'm only in chapter 9, and I could already see there's a spiritual arc happening. So tell us why that's important for you in your books.
That's a really good question. So I do always try to make sure that I have an idea of what the spiritual arc is going into it,
Mm-hmm.
because that is part of the character. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their faith journey is part of their character journey, their growth, as is the same with all of us. Um, But as much as I try to figure out and plan what it's going to be on the front end, it's almost always totally off. Like I get, a third of the way through the book and realize, okay, I understand why it wasn't flowing organically from the get-go, because really she's dealing with this. So I need to go back and figure out how to better work in. Our faith is such a strong part of us, or at least for me and for my characters as well. But figuring out what it is we're really struggling with, or figuring out what it is that God is teaching us in this situation. Sometimes we don't see it until we get at least in the middle, sometimes in the back end. So.
Yeah. And I love that. And often it is like, we initially thought, okay, this is going to be the spiritual journey, or this is what I'm going to be talking about. But as writers, we're always going through something in our own spiritual lives on the journey. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was going to be about this, but I'm going through this. And so now my characters are kind of going through because that's what's real to us. That's what we're dealing with.
Exactly. And sometimes I'm dealing with this and think, oh, my character needs to be dealing with this too. This really fits there. And sometimes it's the other way. Like I'll be writing and it'll just organically flow that this is what the character is learning. And then I'll realize, oh, you know what? I really need to apply that to my life. So yeah. I love when it just flows. And when it surprises me, when God surprises me with, which is very much the case in A Warrior's Heart, especially with Evan.
I love that so much. I had a fun one recently. I was listening, one of my books is getting turned into an audiobook, Where Treetops Glisten. And I have a novella in there with Sarah Sundin and Kara Putman. So I'm listening to it because you have to check for errors and stuff. And I'm dealing with stuff with teenagers and attitudes. And it's, the story was about surrender. And I'm just like crying. And I'm like, this is my own story that I wrote in 2015. And I'm like, this is so good. Yes. So I think like
what I needed to hear right now.
Yeah, sometimes we need to go back and like be reminded like what God was teaching us, because it's something we need. And I found like with edits or something, I'll be like, oh yeah. And it just like God can even work, even though we're writing it and giving it to other people. God can use our words to help us too.
Yes, that is so true. I can't count how many times that's happened with me. But it's great. I hope that readers are impacted even half as much as I am through my writing. So
yeah, that's so good. Okay, so we talk about this series, which is the Brides of Laurent series, but I was shocked by how much you write, and I want you to go like tell us generally like how many books you have out, and then give us some. So maybe someone's just hearing about you for the first time, and they're like, okay, I read this book, but I don't want to wait for the next one. What else can they go back and read that you have written?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I usually release somewhere between 4 and 6 books a year.
That's a lot, folks. 4 and 6 books a year. So go ahead.
Yeah, I write full-time. I can't see the air quotes. Full-time. Yeah. I also am a full-time mom too, so do a lot. But so I usually have a series going with Bethany House, and those release somewhere every 6 to 9 months-ish. The Brides of Laurent is the new series. So this is book 1 in the new series. It's a great way to get into the series.
Yeah.
But then I also individually publish books. I always have a series going there as well. And those usually release about every 3 months, except when I have a Bethany House release. So, so my current series that I'm writing and publishing myself is the Call of the Rockies series, which I am, book 6 releases in November. And those are really fun to write and to read too. There's definitely a Native American component there. And I've really enjoyed those. It started out with the heroine of the first book. She and her father were following in the steps of the Lewis and Clark Trail. So it goes lots of time in the Rocky Mountains there, lots of time in Montana Territory, what would be. Those books are set in around 1830-ish. And in this series, each book kind of follows the same group of people. So each book is a continuation of the story almost, although they're all very much standalones. So
yeah.
So it's fun. It's fun to be writing in 2 different settings, 2 different types of stories. My individually published books are very much strong on the journey component, just because I love the tension that bakes into the story individually. So, but then it's really fun to switch back to the Bethany House series that I have going on at the time, and totally different setting.
Yeah.
It keeps my creativity from getting bored. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, if readers read A Warrior's Heart and want to jump onto something else before the next book releases, the Call of the Rockies series is a great one that I'm releasing. Another much longer series that is backlist, but it's still kind of a reader favorite, is the Mountain series, which is set in actually set in both the Montana Territory and the Canadian Rockies. So,
which if you haven't been there, it's
from.
beautiful. It's beautiful there. Glacier Park is beautiful, and going up
Yes.
into Banff is beautiful, and yeah.
Like I said, we traveled a lot, so I've seen a lot of the country, but there's just something about the Rocky Mountains that is so majestic. It's really hard to put into words. That's one of the challenges of every book, how to put into words the massive grandeur and how it reminds us not only how big God is and how small we are, but yet how special we are to him, that even with all of this that he's made and that he keeps running smoothly and this gorgeousness, he still knows who we are. And even more than that, he still cares intimately about every detail that happens with us. So I love the mountains for that purpose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, when you're up there, it's like the grandeur of God is so clear. Like, it's like you're looking at mountain range after mountain range after mountain range and thinking, this is so amazing. And then there's mountain goats just scaling sheer cliffs, and you're like, what in the world? So yeah, I love it. Such a glimpse into just God's majesty, just looking at what he created.
Yes, it really is. It really is. And there's a definite dangerous component too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you don't have to make up danger. There's danger all around.
It happens, and it's not hard to get creative with different kinds either. So there's plenty of it.
Yeah. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left, but I would just love briefly just to hear like how your writing journey started. I think a lot of readers think maybe is this something I can do? So just briefly, how did your writing journey start?
Yeah. So I've always been a reader. Christian historical romance has always been my favorite genre. But I read contemporary as well, but all within the Christian genre, because I just like that safe place. I never, ever thought I would be a writer. I was working in the big city and had 2 young kids, and really felt like I was, I guess, burnt out where I was. Felt like I was just stuck in this hamster wheel. And so I made my bucket list, decided, you know what, I want to do something that is new or helps me grow, or, all those fun things. Writing happened to be one of the only things on the list that was free. So
Yeah.
it didn't involve traveling to another country or whatnot. But, so I decided, okay, I'm going to write a novel and hope to get it published. Just one novel. That was all that was on the list. But as I was, so even if you've been a reader your entire life, actually figuring out how to start a story, where it should start and what should happen in the story, and doing this full plot arc, that was so much harder than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
But thank God for my local library and some really good writing resources there. So as I was starting through that book, I realized I actually really like this. Like, this feels like my me time. This is a time where I can kind of delve into a story, and I really do like the writing part. And so, like I said, as I was writing that first book, I got the seed of an idea for another book set in the Rocky Mountains. I was so excited about that book. It was hard to finish the first one.
Yeah.
And so from there, it just kept going and going. And it's definitely hard work through the publishing process. But looking back, I can see God's hand through it all, and his guiding, and in the shutting of the doors that I shouldn't go through, and then opening doors that I really wasn't sure if they were doors at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I got started. After a few years in, I was able to finally leave the day job and be home more with the kids and writing more and homeschooling now too. And so it's really been, it's a lot of hard work.
Yes.
Even.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I don't know where you went in the stream. I know. I don't see you in the bottom. Oh, no. Oh, wait. You're showing up. Okay. Oh, the camera changed.
There we go.
You know, it's always fun with technology.
Yes, I love technology. Oh, anyway.
Oh, I think you're echoing, though, for some reason.
Oh,
okay.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's still echoing, but we're wrapping up, so you could just go ahead and finish.
Okay. Anyway, someone told me the other day, you know, you're in the role God has for you when even your worst days there are better than, or are days that you can still live with.
Yes, absolutely.
So very much the case with writing.
Yeah. So. And I love how you said it's the me time, because people say, like, because I homeschool, I have 5 kids still at home. I have 10 total, but 5 still at home. And they're like, how can you write? And I'm like, writing is the fun part. Like, it's creative. It's exploring things. The characters do what I say, unlike the kids all the time.
Yes.
So it is, even though it's work, it also is fulfilling, and yes. I mean, brings that fun element too.
Yes. I'm a better person if I've written that day, or
yeah,
you know, made my word count. That's even better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, Misty, where can people find more information about you and your books?
Yeah, probably the best place is my website, mistymbeller.com. That's kind of my home base. Everything's also available on Amazon. I am on Facebook. Have accounts in the other places, but Facebook's really the place where I get to interact. Through my website, you can also sign up for my newsletter, and that's where I really love connecting with readers, because it just feels a little more one-on-one.
Yeah.
And you can also get a free copy of book 1 in another series set in Wyoming. The book is called A Pony Express Romance. So,
oh, good.
That's a good way to taste my writing and see if it's a good fit for readers.
Awesome. Well, I know I've enjoyed it, so I'm going to have fun going back and exploring some of your other books. I want to show the cover one more time. So, Warrior's Heart. My phone. I think it's trying to play. Don't play it yet. But yeah, so check it out. And I know I'm enjoying it, so you're going to have fun with this book. But Misty, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and sharing the behind the scenes with us.
Thank you, Tricia. I've enjoyed it. Can't wait to see what readers think.
Yeah, so that's the fun part, huh? Seeing all those reviews and getting excited.
Yes.
Well, thank
Sharing
you.
It with the world.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.